Go ahead.
Welcome, everybody. We got people in here. Please say hi in the chat so we can say hello back. Oh my gosh.
This is fun. Look at us. We're all festive.
Go, got people.
Hi.
Hello.
And I think, a lot of messages will go to hosts and panelists, but I think can everyone adjust messaging to send to everyone if they want to?
Yeah. If y'all want to change your messages to go to everyone, that way everyone can see what you're saying.
Everyone can see.
All right.
Helpful slide with that information.
Let us know where you're watching from.
Yeah, and if your name is showing up as Sketchy Mcat Guest, when you put anything in the chat, put your name at the start, especially if it's a question. That way we know who we're talking to.
Nice. Georgia, Seattle, DC, Los Angeles. They're coming in so fast. I can't keep up. Holy moly, there's a lot of people here.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And there will be a lot of people who join us, Sketchy Mcat Guest, which is it's just a result of the way that we're joined. Sketchy did not actually run a special PR promo 22 years ago where, like, if you named your kid Sketchy Mcat, you'd get a reward. I know that might be what you're thinking, but just making sure you know.
That's good.
Oh.
Some love for the holiday sweaters.
Yeah.
Happy holidays from Sketchy and Blueprint.
Yeah.
Big shout out to my colleague Travis Cook, who let me borrow his we made sketchy holiday sweaters last year.
That's awesome.
And he did me a solid and lent me this one, which is his.
That is great. Awesome. Should we introduce some people?
Yeah. And Steven, if you stick around for a bit, you will get an answer to that question.
Steven is not a plant.
No, he's actually not, which is funny. All right, well, to get us started on meeting everybody, Ryan, why don't you dive in? You're furthest to the left, and then we'll pass on.
I will start and say hello to Kevin, who professed his love for the Pre-Med Playbook Guide to the Medical School Application Process, which is this book right here. Short little plug. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, founder of the Medical School Headquarters and MedEd Media. I started February will be 10 years since I registered medicalschoolhq.net, which is just crazy. I record lots of podcasts. I make videos. I've written books, and I'm now known, hopefully, more for being the co-founder of Maps, which is an awesome technology platform helping students track their progress into medical school. That's me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'll go next because I think I'm the next one on the list. But my name is Joel Bervel. I'm a third-year medical student right now at Washington State University. So good to see so many people on here right now. One of the things that I do outside of medical school is I use my social media to talk about what it's like to be a medical student, as well as things in medicine we need to be talking more about. But I'm excited here to talk to you about MCAT and how you can get ready for it. I'm right now actually studying for Step 1, which is going to be using a lot of the same tools that you use from MCAT going to Step. So hopefully what I share is going to be pretty relevant because I'm still learning today and figuring out what the best ways to study still are. And that's going to be a process going on all the time.
All right. Hi. So I'm Liz. I am the Senior Director of Education here at Blueprint. And as the bio says, my life has been the MCAT for a long time now. And it is sort of a personal love. I was a pre-med way back in the day, and sort of turns out didn't love medicine, did love tests, and wound up here. So I've got quite a lot of experience helping students get ready for this test. I've been a teacher for a long time. I've been a content creator for MCAT content for a long time. And in just a second, I'll talk a little bit more about Blueprint, but I want to go ahead and let Adam introduce himself as well.
Sure. Hello. I'm Adam Gray. I'm the head of medical and pre-medical education at Sketchy. I guess 10 years, the theme of all of our bios here. Joel, I don't know what were you doing 10 years ago? You need to have something too.
I was probably in high school at the time.
All right. Joel was in high school at the time. 10 years since a really good grade in, science class, probably, right? Anyway, I've also been working in MCAT and lots of other test prep for over 10 years. And I was I was Sketchy's first MCAT employee, actually, last year. And so those of you, I know many of you will already be aware because you joined through Sketchy, but Sketchy launched an MCAT program this past summer. And that has been my team, still working on it, building a lot more. And that's what I'm here to talk about today as well.
And just so there's no confusion, my way of spelling gray is the correct way. Your way is the wrong way. So
No-
just to get that
No
out of the way.
relation. Yeah.
No relation. Yeah. And a quick little funny aside, Liz and Joelle know each other from many years ago on the other side of the country. Tell that story real quick, Joelle, because you're the one that was like, wait a minute.
So I was sitting here and I was looking at Liz and I'm like, the voice sounds familiar. You look familiar. I feel like I've known you from some past life. And it clicked on me that when I was an undergrad at Yale University, Liz actually taught my MCAT class that I took. So this is, and I did not realize that until this moment, like literally 10 minutes ago. So this is truly a full circle moment right here. We did not plan this. It was not like in the works for the past 5-6 years. It just kind of happened.
And Joelle, just between you and me, was she good?
She was wonderful. So
All
we're
right.
in good hands today.
Awesome. Well,
And,
we have lots of awesome people here tonight.
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk just a tiny bit about Blueprint, but to answer two questions I saw in the chat really quickly. One, yes, we're going to send you the recording from tonight. We hope you stick around. We are gonna have a giveaway at the end, and not to spoil anything, but it relates to some questions asked earlier, so gonna be pretty exciting. And the other question that I saw asked, oh my goodness, I think I just forgot what it was. So yeah, I don't remember at all. But to dive in on Blueprint, so Blueprint offers quite a lot in the MCAT space. I'm not going to wax on about it forever. I could. I've got a real passion for our products, but just to give y'all a really clear picture of what Blueprint does, in case you're kind of coming to us from the Sketchy side and you've never heard of Blueprint before, we offer comprehensive prep in the MCAT space. We also sell exam bundles. If you've heard in the past of the Blueprint or Next Step exams, those are the exams that we sell. Blueprint, formerly Next Step, in the MCAT space. We also have a very cool set of tools. Among them, we're particularly proud of our study plan. It's really customizable. Also, just say it's beautiful, and it helps you really make sure that your schedule for the MCAT is really set up for what you need. We've got phenomenal instructors. Awkwardly, I'm here and I think they're great, and apparently I'm good at it. So I would definitely say we've got a phenomenal team of instructors. We have particularly test-like materials is sort of our focus, and of course, we know that what students really need from us is higher scores, and so we guarantee that. Here is a list of kind of the things that we offer. It is quite a lot, and I'll give an extra wink to the and more, because we'll be talking a little bit more about even more today. But I think that's kind of the picture of who we are. We are really thinking about the comprehensive experience for MCAT students, but we also want to make sure that students who are looking for smaller packages, who really just need that extra boost before test day, whether that be supplemental tutoring or exams, can get that from us. And y'all aren't here for this information, so I'm going to pass it off to Adam to talk a little bit about what Sketchy is.
Yeah, similar to what Liz said, I want to just say a couple minutes about what Sketchy is. Those of you who are coming from the Blueprint side may not be fully familiar with Sketchy. So Sketchy is, you may have heard of a company called Sketchy Medical in the past. We are now just Sketchy, and that's in part because we're doing more than just medical. But we're a visual learning platform. We've been used by over 300,000 students since our founding. And we like to say 300,000 people are now doctors after using Sketchy because of how many people in medical school have used Sketchy Micro, Sketchy Farm, Sketchy Path, Sketchy Biochem, in our clinical programs as well. And as I said, we have an MCAT program as well. We said, hey, it turns out the people who use Sketchy in med school are literally the same people who used to take the MCAT. So if it works for you in med school, you're probably the kind of person who's going to work for the MCAT as well. And I want to highlight the third thing on this slide here, which is that we talked to some of our first people who use the product, and we asked them a few questions. But one of the things that we asked is, does Sketchy make MCAT prep fun? And vast majority of people said yes. And I do want to be clear about what we asked. We did say, does it make it fun? Not does it make it more fun. We went for the harder question. Does it make it fun? And so we have a lot of lessons on all the MCAT science subjects at this point. We got psychology, we got biology, chemistry, organic chemistry, physics. And just in case you haven't seen it before, we've also found it really helps to do a slight demonstration of exactly what a sketchy lesson looks like. So I want to give an example of reflection. You might have seen a lot of reflection lessons in physics class or in high school or wherever, where you've got diagrams and you've got formulas and things like that in order to teach you everything. And with the sketchy reflection lesson, for instance, we do have that, but we also frame things in a visual and as memorable as possible way. So what we say is, it's Thirsty Thursday at the local elf pub, and we'll be using their antics to review the physics of reflection. A concave mirror is actually capable of producing a real image or a virtual image, depending on how close you get to the mirror. When you're close, you get an enlarged right side up virtual image, just like the reflection of this thirsty elf drowning the dregs in that bowl. When you get farther away from a concave mirror, the elf in the red, who's patiently waiting his turn behind that fellow, you get a shrunken and inverted real image. We also cover key equations like 1 over focal length, so equals 1 over the object's distance from the mirror plus 1 over the object's distance from the mirror, image's distance from the mirror. To help you remember that, at the bar in the elf pub, there's a 1-shaped glass over an F-shaped dagger. Then to the right of the equal sign shaped shelves, the 1 glasses are over an O-shaped purse and an I-shaped wand with a plus sign beer tap in between, of course. And this is just one little sample from one little lesson that we have. Every piece of high yield MCAT material, that's what Sketchy MCAT is about. In this sort of formula, we really just burrow it into your head with visual and visual learning and storytelling, memorable pieces, and lots of characters and settings.
And just for clarification, you said you burrow it into their head, not bro it into their head, right? Because in today's day and age, like broing it into someone's head, I think bro is thrown around way too much.
I did say burrow. That was what I
Okay,
meant.
good.
Yeah.
I mean, broing it into someone's head might be something different too. I don't know. But I love these diagrams, and so many comments coming in of like, I've been using Sketchy for a week. I'm remembering stuff so much better now that I'm using it. So that's awesome. I love this. And I had Sketchy on the Pre-Med Years podcast, if people want to go listen to that, about kind of the science behind and the understanding behind why this actually works. So something for people to go check out. Awesome. Anything else? Ready to keep going?
I think we're probably ready for some tips.
Right. Yeah, let's jump into it. So the kind of meat and potatoes of today is we're gonna be breaking down some tips. Obviously, this is 60 days until you have the MCAT, 60 days or less. And so we have 6 tips for you to help each of you kind of understand some really high yield stuff to maximize this time that you have, because apparently the MCAT's important. So we need a good score to get into medical school, get into the medical school that you want. So tip number 1 we have here: practice like you're going to play. We've all heard this story. Practice makes perfect. And I always have heard the better version of that, of perfect practice makes perfect. You can't just go out there and do anything to do this. Adam, what are your thoughts on practice like you're going to play? How does someone do that when the real play of this is sitting in a testing center on a computer for 7.5 hours?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right that what you're going to be doing on the real MCAT is sitting in a testing center, hopefully at a safe social distance from a certain number of strangers who are also taking the MCAT. You will probably be wearing a mask. I believe that is still the consistent guideline for every single, test. You'll be sitting there for about 7 hours every section. You know how long each one will be, and I can't say how many of my students that I've had in the past, I'll ask, hey, have you taken a full length yet? Did you take your diagnostic yet? Et cetera, et cetera. And they say, oh yeah, I'm almost done with it. And it's not always the best sign. I'd always give them certain advice whenever they said that, which is, so the one you're almost done with, you should finish it. But when you're taking your tests, you need to set the time aside. You can't say, well, I went out to brunch and now I'm back at 2:00 and now I'm going to take my first 2 sections of my full length and then Monday, I'll take the rest. You might need to skip brunch that Sunday where you're going to take your test, is what I'm saying. Start it at the time of day that your real MCAT is going to start, and time it perfectly. Nobody is going to stop you from pausing a practice exam physically, but you need to stop yourself from pausing that exam when you want a realistic score. There's also the physical arrangement that you want to have. You want to get yourself in a place that is of the appropriate level of distraction of a testing center, which is actually not completely silent and perfectly silent. It actually going to a library or a study room, or maybe even, if you have kind of roommates or housemates or so on, kind of family members kind of milling about in the background, it's important to be able to deal with that level of low-level distraction, because some people will be raising their hand and going to the bathroom in the middle of the testing center. Some people will be opening and closing doors. Some people will be hopefully not coughing next to you, but they could be. You wouldn't be able to control that if so. All of that is about just getting your brain to do exactly the thing you're going to have to do when you are trying to execute and score highly. And the first time you do it, you're going to feel more pressure if you've never done it before, but that's why you do it that way, because the 7th or 8th or 9th time you do it, that's going to be, or more potentially, is going to be when you actually take it, and then you'll just be more used to it. Yeah.
Liz, Joelle, anything to add on to that?
Always. So I'll try to keep it brief and give Joelle an opportunity to comment as well. I'll add a couple of really specific things. Right now, there's a pandemic, which does make leaving the house hard. But one of the things that I've especially been telling students lately is, while it is probably easiest to take every practice test in your house, you do not want to create a mental context of the same setting every time you test, because you will be more uncomfortable in the testing center if you've only ever had the same kinds of background noises and distractions. So whether that means you go and, again, try to be socially distant and safe about it, and take the test in a sort of a Starbucks even, or a library is usually what I would recommend if you have libraries open near you. Try testing in several different places if possible, and make sure your equipment also is kind of matching up. I'm not going to tell you to lug a desktop to the library because that would be rough, but I will say bring a plug-in mouse and bring a plug-in separate keyboard to get practice with those. And then my final little pro tip on this is that you are not suddenly going to be a master of the testing tools in the interface on test day if you have never used them before. You can let me know in the chat if you've tried highlighting in a practice test that has test-like highlighting. It is a nightmare. It is not easy. It is not easy to use that highlighting tool. And so having practice with those tools, knowing how you're going to use them, and having practiced in a test-like interface before is gonna be really important for having that down. And Joelle?
Jessica said it is a nightmare. As you guys are commenting, as you all are commenting, what is your best tip for practicing like you're gonna play? Joelle, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll just add in the last one that for me is the most important is about the break times. I think those can really mess us up, especially when you have an ability to not necessarily use the break time in the same way you would in the real testing center. So making sure that when you're taking your break, make it as real as possible for testing center, meaning that don't check your phone in between, like put things away. If you have snacks, I actually like to copy the type of snacks I'll be eating the day of too. And during the day, when I'm taking like a full test, actually do the same breakfast I'll be eating, like eggs, typically something that's going to keep you all the way through, carry you through, eating the same snacks, taking the same breaks. I think those types of things are the little things we don't often think about, but they make a huge difference day of when you're like, oh wow, like I didn't really think about breaks, and now I'm like freaking out, or like I want to check my phone, I want to do all these things. So really getting yourself in the mindset of remembering all the little details in between as well. So that's just the one thing I'll add on to these great tips.
I'm glad you mentioned food, Joel, because that's one that I hear from students all the time. It's like, oh, I'm just going to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich the day of my test. I'm like, when's the last time you ate a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? They're like, well, 2 years ago, maybe. I'm like, why are you going to risk a peanut butter and jelly sandwich that sounds delicious, but you haven't had in forever? Like, make sure you're eating and can tolerate the foods that you're going to plan on eating on test day with stress and everything else going on in your body. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's important. So awesome first tip. Cindy asks, what food do you recommend on test day? Joel, you mentioned eggs. I don't
know if there's any others. I know eggs have been my go-to in the morning. It fills me up. It keeps me like throughout the day. I keep like a granola bar, small things, lots of water. I actually don't drink coffee, which people think I'm crazy for that.
I don't either.
Yeah, that's all. Okay. See, thank you. Okay. Solidarity. I love it.
You'll have to pass it to me so we can talk about coffee.
But figure out like what works for you. So I can't do coffee. I've tried it once. It like put me on a crash. So I just water is my thing. Figuring out what works for you and kind of don't experiment too much, but figuring out what keeps you going.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sorry, we're all gonna want to talk all the time, Ryan. You may have to cut us off, but I think we got time for now. I'll say for me personally on test days, because I still go take tests occasionally for fun. Yeah. I find it really important to bring a variety of snacks because this is gonna sound silly, but like I'm in the middle of a test. I'm already stressed as hell. I'm not having a great day, right? And then I leave and all that's there is like a mediocre apple that suddenly I'm not feeling great about anymore. And that's not a great feeling. So I'll bring all these little bags of different snacks so that in the middle, I can just feel like, oh, I wanted this for a snack and I've got it here as an option, just for sanity purposes. I don't know if you had anything to...
I just have something to say about coffee, which is, and this is an important tip. In order to do this practice like you're going to play and exactly what you're going to do on the test, you need to drink exactly as much coffee as you usually do. So know what your dose is, do exactly that, no more, no less. Now is not the time to either ramp up and try to supercharge yourself or to try to go off the drug. Is what I'm saying. But right. Look, we've got 4 people here. We've got 2 coffee drinkers and 2 non-coffee drinkers. So you can succeed with or without, depending on who you are. Just make sure you calibrate right.
Yes. Now that we've talked proper dosing, let's get to our next tip. Building a plan as soon as possible. Apparently in life, if you want to do something extraordinary, you should probably plan it out, right? You're not going to all of a sudden wake up tomorrow morning and go run a marathon. You have a many-week training program to get there. Joel, when you were in this process of planning for the Mcat, how did you go about building a plan?
I truly think this is the most important piece of any plan, of any step when you're studying for the Mcat. If you go in without a plan, you're going to get lost along the way, and you're not going to know kind of what to go, when to be taking your tests. So for me, I structured around my content review. When did I want to get through that? What was my content going to be? Was it going to be books? Was it going to be videos? Was it going to be audiobooks? Was it listening to Dr. Gray's podcast, which I did when I was working out, and listening to like the little practice questions that were in there? Pro tip, it's great to do that. But figuring out how to kind of structure it out, but also writing it out, making sure you get an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe write like week 1, here's what I'm going to be doing. Here's what I want to get through. Depending on when you're taking it, some people might be still taking classes when you come back into the new year, or some people might not be taking classes. So figuring out what's your other schedule too. How am I going to manage this with work? How am I going to manage this with life things I have to do too? So I like to putting out an Excel spreadsheet, writing out week 1, week 2, week 3. Here's what I'm going to do on Monday. Here's what I want to get done on Tuesday. Here's what I want to get done on Wednesday. And of course, leaving a break day to make sure that you're consolidating all the information and keeping time for yourself to review back through those practice tests that you do and any practice questions that you do as well. I think that's something people often forget is it takes time to go through. And I think later on we'll talk about how you actually review, but it's important to make sure you give yourself enough time and you don't sell yourself short on that, because if you're just doing tests but not reviewing it through, you can make those mistakes over and over again. So with building a plan, I think it comes down to being specific, putting it on a paper or on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere where you can look back at it, and then making sure that you're going along with it. If you need to readjust, don't be afraid to readjust. If you missed a week, you need to look forward and say, hey, I didn't get through this content. How am I going to readjust it? Go back to your schedule, look through it, and make those changes as necessary. No,
nice.
Other people.
Liz, Blueprint has an amazing study planner tool. How can that be worked into this?
Yeah, we really do try to set it up for our students for their success. But a question that was asked in chat does tie into that study planner. But even for students who don't have it, someone had asked, okay, but what about when you get behind? You made a plan. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a later tip. But what I'll say is that something that is really important to be ready and able to do is to kind of rebalance your study plan. For students who are using one of our study plans, that's a reset button. If you're doing something like an Excel spreadsheet, it's going to be a little bit more intense to go through and do that reorganizing. But what you have to avoid doing is just kind of letting it pile up and not resetting, and just kind of not dealing with the practicality of the fact that you actually do need to go in and reset your expectations. So you have to have that. And as someone just said in the chat, I think that's Matt said, flex days are a must. Having days off every week are really helpful, both because you need a break, and also because if you need to have a day to catch up days are really important. And actually, like, that's going to be true even up through step 1, step 2 when you're in medical school. You're going to have catch up days. I am also, I swear I'm not going to talk too much, but I'm going to say my favorite thing to say to people right around this time of year: you are in the danger zone. If you are planning 60 days or less of prep for the MCAT from here, you may have done the thing that I always tell my students not to do, which is you told yourself you were going to suddenly develop massive studying skills and put in 8 to 10 hours a day over the entire Christmas break. You're not. Like, I'm trying to think of a nice way to say that. You're not. You may get some studying done, but there's usually, for most people, family events, things going on. You've maybe just gotten through finals. So taking a look at that study plan now and rebalancing it to be realistic, which we'll get to, but really making sure that you are not building a study plan you can't follow. Yeah, Ryan.
Good ones. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah. So I really would just second all of this here. The importance of building a plan, the importance of reassessing that plan regularly, not just because you might be running ahead or behind it, but because you will learn things about your own abilities as you develop. There's another tip later on about that one that I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But like the constant readjustment, the staying realistic, I guess that's another tip too. There's a lot that's all connected here. There were also a couple questions that I saw. Actually, one of them said, how can you integrate the sketchy lessons with Blueprint study plan and resources? Number one, I'd say make sure you stick around for a little bit longer in this session to learn something about that. But also, we have actually designed the sketchy MCAT product so that the names of the units and the chapters and the lessons are very obviously coordinated with the topics and curricula and taxonomy of Blueprint and of, things you'll see in other resource tools like AMC or the classes you took or things like that. And so there, if you see, I was weak on this in a full length, and then, you'll be able to find that sketchy lesson if it's there in order to help. And so there's kind of a dialogue there.
Yeah, I love the constant adjustments. The kind of visual that I always use and the language that I always use when I talk is constant course correction. Having been an Air Force flight surgeon and having my private pilot, I always use the metaphor, if you want to use, of a plane flying from New York to LA. Like, it does not fly in a straight line. It is constantly going left and right with the wind pushing it around, constantly course correcting all along the way. And that's all you have to do as a student, is constantly course correct. So with that said, Our next one, Joelle, Adam just mentioned, right? Being realistic. And Liz, you mentioned as well, like just brute force. We humans, we overestimate. The saying is something like we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in 5 years. For the MCAT student right now doing this is we way overestimate what we can do in a month or 2 months or 3 months before our MCAT test day. And we think just all of a sudden through brute force, we're gonna all of a sudden get those study habits, all of a sudden start memorizing everything that hasn't been sticking. How can a student be realistic and understand? Because this is one of the biggest struggles I think that students have is how can I be realistic and know that I'm going to be ready to take the test?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a problem that a lot of students have is figuring out how do I be honest with myself? How do I make sure that the things that I'm doing are realistic, that I can actually get through all the material? I saw a great question in the chat that reflects it, that says, I have all these resources and not enough time to get through them all. And so I guess one of the first things I tell people is to look at your track record so far. You're a pre-med student, you've gotten through college so far. What have been the ways that you've learned, and how long has it taken, for example, during finals period? If you've been a crammer, understanding that cramming is not necessarily going to work for this test in particular, and asking yourself, okay, if I can't cram, what can I do instead, and where can I kind of make a bet with myself halfway where maybe I'm in the cramming space, but also I'm also in the start early space and trying to figure out what's the middle ground between there. And it's not easy, but I think it takes time to, once you start studying, figuring out, hey, okay, maybe I'm not going as fast as I thought I was going to. Maybe I should slow down, or maybe I should relook at this resource in particular. And once you find a resource that works, I think stick with it. Don't jump around too much if you're figuring out that one is working for you after some time. Realistic is all about looking at things like diagnostic tests, figuring out where you're going from there, and seeing if you're improving. If you're not improving over time, that means somewhere along the way you're not being realistic with yourself, and you maybe take a step back and say, maybe I didn't know all of the physics. Maybe I'm not doing my best on cars. Maybe I need to look at some different resources, or maybe I need to stick with this resource because it is working. So being realistic is all about looking at the metrics that you have for yourself, making sure you're understanding, and then you're using them to your best advantage and not ignoring them, because I think that's what we want to do. Sometimes we don't see improvement and we're just say we're going to brute force, keep going. So kind of depends, but if it's working, stick with it. If it's not working, try and find something else.
Joel, you had mentioned all these resources.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see potentially, and everyone can answer this maybe, the biggest mistake being too many resources students are using, or not enough resources students are using?
Oof. I want to say it's dependent on the person.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think I want to say too many resources, usually, but I think some people. No, yeah, actually, no, it's probably too many resources usually. Now that I think about it, I'm like, no, I've never been at a time where I'm like, I don't have a million different things to choose from. It's like, which one do I choose now? So usually it's too many resources, I think, at least for me. I'm like thinking from like a medical school perspective now and studying for STEP. Too many resources. There's so many things you want to get through, not enough time to get through them, like was said in the chat. But once you find something that works, I think stick with that, because there's always going to be a million resources out there. That's why we're here, because I think these ones have been proven to work well.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I have a couple of really specific thoughts on being realistic with yourself. One is this is not my number. This is a number I'm pretty sure everyone who's here, Ryan and Joel and Adam, all know. The AAMC has released figures that say that students need to study for the MCAT in student reported data, 260 to 300 hours, depending on which AAMC sort of release you look at. And I think 280 is the one I remember most recently. But you're not 280 hours in a month. That's a cram. That's a cram. So thinking about it in that way, thinking about if the MCAT was your full-time job, it would still only be 440 hours a week, right? 70 hours a week is double a normal full-time job. We're really looking at probably, for most students, 3 to 4 months of prep time. And I know a lot of you joined for a while. I'm looking for those last minute tips. But if you are just getting started and you're testing in under 60 days, congratulations, you're cramming for the MCAT, and time to sort of think from there. The other thing I'll add on be realistic, and I know Adam, and we'll have thoughts on this, but Ryan, I suspect you'll have some real insights here as well, is that students have, and having been there, I feel this on such a fundamental level, it makes sense that you have a plan for yourself. And I don't mean for the MCAT. I mean, you've told yourself a story about what you are going to do. You're going to take the MCAT. You're going to do well. You're going to go to med school on X date. You're hoping to go to Y school. That's something you've been telling yourself, maybe for some of you, for years and years. And being realistic is also about saying, okay, it's a month to test day. My score isn't where it needs to be. I'm going to need to take a step back. I'm going to need to move my test. That plan is going to need to change. It doesn't mean I can't accomplish my goals, but I do have to be realistic, because just throwing yourself at this test over and over as though that's going to change something is not going to be how you manage to actually accomplish your end goal there, which, whether it's next year or the year after, is to become a doctor, right? Like, that's really what you're hoping for. So that's what I mean by be realistic.
Yeah, being realistic. And my experience with the MCAT was from many moons ago. I was a paper test taker for 4.5 hour test, not the current 7.5 hour iteration. So my experience was miserable. I hated the MCAT. I wish there were resources now then that there are now. So I would have had so much more fun with sketchy pictures and trying to learn that way, because that stuff just didn't stick in my head. But is what it is. Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I agree here. The thing I would add here is about the actual setting of those goals in the first place. A lot of times you walk in, you're like, well, what score do you want to get? Oh, I want to get a perfect score. That's the most common answer to your goal score is 528. If your goal score is 528, then you need to do some research. That's and I mean that sincerely. It's actually a really good signal. If what you're saying is, I just want to score really high, and that's your answer, that's a really good signal that, and it doesn't have to be a lot of time, maybe like even just a couple hours of like Googling around to the kind of schools you want to go to and the kind of ranges of scores that they have, and talking to your pre-med advisors. Your goal score needs to be informed by where you want to be in a couple years. And so it's about making that vision and finding out what number fits into it, rather than just straight up pushing. Ultimately, you're going to be pushing for the highest score you can, but getting that goal score, if you're just saying, well, I want it to be high, it's good to do a little more research. I'm also following some questions in the chat. This is a bit of a tangent before we go on to our next one. A couple of people asked about tips for cars. This isn't going to be a whole like car-centric seminar, but as a sketchy representative in the room here, I got to give a call out to visualization as you read Carr's passages. This is a really, it's not necessarily an obvious tool, but it's something that works for a lot of students. And especially once you get a little practice with it, you can kind of even have a little fun with it, where if you're reading a passage and the passage is about some, social science experiment or social science thesis, or it's about like, Immanuel Kant's philosophy or whatever, just imagining what this guy looks like. And if it's about him arguing with someone else, imagining him in a room, like putting up his dukes and getting into a fight with someone else, and just allowing that to be an interesting story will help you remember it better, store it better in the first place, and bring it back when you get to the questions. So that's my 30-second cars tip, which and hey, this little image we have on the deck is about driving anyway, so it's a good time to talk about cars.
There we go.
We all got to hold the mic closer. We've received some feedback. Yeah. Hello. Nice radio voice there. Hello.
Good job. All right. Well, tip 3 in the books. Tip 4, high yield content and key critical thinking skills. to me, I read this and I go, like, this sounds nothing like the test that I was taking in college. I would just cram everything in my head, regurgitate it out on test day, get my A, and move on. What do you mean high yield content? The teacher would just tell us what we had to know for the test. I would go in and spit it back out at them. Liz, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is high yield content for you is the content you're struggling with on full lengths. That's your high yield content, right? The stuff you're not getting right now is the stuff that will get you some more points. Yes, there are some content areas that are more tested on the MCAT. If you have not memorized your amino acids, go memorize your amino acids, please. But more broadly, high yield refers to both it's tested more often and also it is something that is going to yield you points on the test. So high yield content is going to be highly testable content. It's also just going to be the content you need. Key critical thinking skills. The MCAT changed as Ryan. I also was originally a shorter, it had a writing section the first time I took it. And one of the big changes that happened for the MCAT a while ago that in some ways is kind of still percolating through our shared ancestral knowledge about the MCAT is a shift towards even more critical thinking on the test, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary questions, right? Questions that are requiring you to bring a lot together, questions that respond well to testing skills. And I think that the reason why this tip stands out to me is that most students will have a bias towards one of these or the other. And for most students who are thinking about med school, it's towards the content. You're really, really kind of focusing on how do I memorize everything I need to know? But when you hit a question that talks about fluid dynamics in a brand new context of blood pressure for you, get thrown by that and can't get the question right, it doesn't help that you memorize the equation if you can't recognize that you needed to use it. And that's really why I think the two of them together are such a focus. Test like practice helps with that. Building these skills together is something that you can focus on separately and kind of review, but you're going to need to do real MCAT questions to be able to practice with critical thinking skills as well as content. And yeah, that's kind of my rant there. If you're over focused on content, get yourself out of that content and into some practice, maybe even some guided strategies. If you're really struggling with a particular section, there are ways to approach passages, questions, even different answer choice types that will help if you're struggling, especially because the test is kind of a mile wide, but an inch deep, right? The content is, you don't have to be an absolute expert in immunology to do well on questions, but you do need to be able to critically think with the content that you know. So yeah, that's my elevator pitch on what this means. But I am sure that we have exciting stuff to add. I will.
No, you go
guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said a lot of what I was going to say. It's really about making sure you figure out what are your weak points, and you take those weak points and you dive into them. And so after a test, and I think this might be the next tip, so hopefully I'm not getting too far ahead, but making sure you review and figure out why you got it wrong. So I won't go any more deeper. I'll just leave it there and I'll let you go say the rest. But yeah, make sure that you're understanding what is high yield for you, because this high yield is not the same for everyone. For your friend, they might know different things. And so figuring out what is the things you need to focus in on, for me was physics. So that was where I spent the most time, made sure I could remember equations and things. So yeah, making sure you're doing that and then coupling it with specific questions to practice those critical thinking skills.
Yeah. The Liz, the comment that you made about a mile wide and an inch deep, that's something we say all the time on the MCAT podcast. Just for clarification on what that means, Joelle, you just mentioned physics, right? The physics knowledge that you had to do well in your physics course in college was very in depth, right? You had to go down several layers to get a question right on a test. On the MCAT, it's very superficial, right? That inch deep, just very superficial, skimming the top of the knowledge. Yeah, you may have to know some equations, but they're not going to dig deep and have you apply those equations to something completely random out in the world. So that's what that mile wide, inch deep means. And I think content the biggest mistake that we talk about all the time, people staying in content too much, which is, Liz, what you were talking about. I think students get so scared. They see how much information is quote unquote required to know on the MCAT. They put themselves back into their syllabus of their courses in undergrad, and they go, oh my gosh, this is going to take forever. And so they just stay in content the whole time. So just expanding on that a little bit. Adam, any extra thoughts here?
Yeah, even on your mile wide, inch deep, especially with the physics and general chemistry parts, the classes you took in college that were all about solving math problems, there will be some math problems on the MCAT, but the math is not actually what is going to get you to the answer. It's the conceptual underlying knowledge and things like, is it an inverse relationship or a direct relationship? Is it a squared variable or a non-squared variable? And so that conceptual intuitive knowledge is going to get you along the way there. Somebody asked a question in the chat a while ago about any tips for doing calculations. And actually, this is a very similar piece there, which is that the vast majority of MCAT math questions, the answer choices are so far apart from each other that it's not even just about rounding. It's about just very, very broad estimation and kind of enforcing yourself to manage your time such that you never just dig in and spend 5 whole minutes on a math question. You only spend 1 or 2 minutes to get to what you think is the best estimation. And then you can mark the item and come back later if you have time and you really want to do the math. But a lot of that is going to be done by conceptual knowledge. Yeah.
I realized I have an unpopular opinion on the question of high yields content. So if you want to look at the test's actual breakdown, what you're worried about is physics. What you should be worried about is psych soc. I'm just going to mic drop at that.
Really?
That's a teaser for our next webinar. I think we'll be able to argue for an entire 90 minutes about that.
Okay.
The other thing, and actually, Ryan, I think we move to the next tip here, because what I was going to say about this, about like high yield content, actually has to do with reviewing and looking for trends as well. Yeah. Like if you're talking about this continuum of, do I need more content or do I need more practice critical thinking skills? One way I like to think about it is like follow your inner Charlie Brown. And by that, I mean, anyone who's seen any of the old Charlie Brown movies where there's voice acting to them, when he gets really frustrated by something, he goes, "Arg!" Like, we know that sound. And I know when I review one of my own tests, and what I've always done is I'll see a question and there will be something about what I was thinking during that question where I will realize where I went wrong, and I will make the Charlie Brown song. I go, I didn't know this one fact that would have got me to the right answer, or I went down the wrong path in my logic, because I'll remember my cognition. And you need to follow that frustration moment and realize, was it something you just didn't know, which means you got to go back to some content, or was it a process of thinking where you went down the wrong way, or you integrated information wrong? Use that frustration to your advantage to look for trends and structure the rest of your study schedule. And that's here tip number 5, which is, if you are 60 days out to the MCAT, I think literally no one here today is exactly 60 days out from their MCAT, because there isn't an MCAT test on February 13th, for instance. But if you are 2 months out from your MCAT, you should not know today what you're going to study 2 weeks or 3 weeks before your test, because what you should be studying those last few weeks down the home stretch is whatever you identified as missing when you took your last full length. That's the answer. You should have time set aside to study a lot that week, but you should use that really in-depth, realistic, full-length experience and review every passage that you went through, every question you went through, and use that to make a list of, I got to review this content. I'm going to use this resource to review this. I'm going to do a time practice on this. I'm going to do this many CARS passages because I got this many CARS questions wrong. And you will notice patterns and trends, especially if you get the same, if you get multiple questions wrong for the same reason on one full length, you will be frustrated. But that's a wonderful sign, because that means if you can do that well, you're going to get you're going to get multiple questions right if you see it. That's the definition of a high yield topic. So that's that guideline there. Got to take full lengths often enough to continue guiding your studies.
So Adam, what I heard you say is every student should be making a list and checking it twice. Perfect. Joelle, what Adam just said, I want to go to you next because you're the most recent MCAT test taker. My assumption is Adam just said, take lots of tests and know what you're doing right and wrong. But some students take too many tests and don't do proper review. How did you review your MCAT full lengths to know to create that list and write down the things that you were missing consistently or inconsistently, the things that would lead to those next few days of studying?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know when I first started taking practice tests for the MCAT and reviewing them, I wasn't doing it the right way. I wasn't improving. I wasn't seeing any changes. And so one of my advisors told me, there's another plug for Microsoft Excel. I guess I love Excel a lot, but every single question I actually went through that I got wrong, and I would write it down and I'd say why I got it wrong. So kind of what you were saying before, is it because I didn't know it? It's a missing content piece. Is it because I misunderstood the question? AKA, did I misread it, or did I think it was going a different way? Or whatever the reason is. And once I went through and kind of identified why I got it wrong and actually had it on an Excel spreadsheet, I would kind of even use like a little filter and say, okay, here's the things that, here's the ones I got wrong because I didn't know the content. That made it easier for me to go back, write down those topics, look if there's any patterns between the topics, and then go and kind of tailor my studying around that. And so for me, I think what made the biggest difference was in reviewing, making sure that I wrote down specifically, I didn't know the concept. Did I misread it? Why did I misread it? Was it because I didn't have enough time to get through the test? Really figuring out and understanding what the causes of me getting the questions wrong were. And I think after I started doing that, that improved my score a lot, because I realized, hey, it's actually not that I don't know the content, but maybe I'm reading the question too slowly, and I just don't have enough time, and I get all the last 10 questions wrong. Why not start reading the question first and then switch it up in terms of how I'm actually approaching the test? So it's more of a strategy problem. I think that helped me a lot.
Nice. And just an expansion, reviewing all of those questions you got wrong, and I would suggest all the ones you got right, because sometimes you get it right for the wrong reason.
Yes.
Liz, any extra input on this one?
Yeah, first off, for those of y'all that were immediately stressing out about the psych soc thing, just to clarify, I saw the chat blow up. Physics is one subject within a section called Chem Phys that contains multiple subjects. Psych soc is a whole section. That's the whole point there. Really, what you should be focusing on is what you're missing, which is what this tip is about, right? And what I would add here is you're not the only Excel lover. I am right there. At Blueprint, we recommend something we call a lesson learned journal. And what I'll say about those is that do not be afraid of additional columns. Do not be afraid of getting specific and creating very categorized data. I am a great big nerd, right? And when I say look for trends, when I'm looking for trends, I am literally looking for trends, right? I am keeping track of whether or not I changed answers from right to wrong, wrong to right. I am keeping track of whether I'm missing questions because of pure content issues, whether it's kind of like a failure to translate, whether I didn't get something from the passage. I really try to keep track of exactly what's going wrong, because that way, like, I can analyze myself as though I am an experiment in the MCAT, very meta, right? As though my own progress was a data table in a passage that I was trying to analyze for trends. And that really, I think, can level up your skills, just because when you take a test like this, there will be questions you remember as hard, and you may want to go study those things because you remember those questions, but that's one question. Passage. You're never going to see that question or that passage again. But if you missed 4 questions on a content area, even if you didn't remember them particularly well, tracking, looking for those trends, you're going to identify those bigger problems.
Nice. All right. There it is. Review, review, review. The only way to improve is to review.
I noticed a couple of questions in the chat
Yeah.
too. I'm just I guess I've made myself chat question policeman. I'm sorry. There were a couple of them were just very very quick. One said, so review should realistically take hours. I think Emma asked that question. Yes. It really should, and it's some of the most valuable time you can spend. Actually.
A rule of thumb that we talk about on the Mcat podcast all the time is reviewing should take you twice as long as it did to take the test.
There was also
Which sounds scary.
Yeah, there was also a sort of like yield weighting question about different subjects. How much is general chemistry versus organic chemistry? Now it varies a bit. And it especially varies of like which skill is being tested. You know, if you end up with a skill 4 question about Gen Chem, it's not quite the same as if it's a skill 1 question. But in the Chem Phys section of the exam, it's 33%. I think it's 33%, 35%. Yeah. So somewhere in the 30s of general chemistry, only 15% organic chemistry, 25% physics. And that's all within one section there. So one section of the test. So, pound for pound, biology, biochemistry, and psych soc have more pounds, I guess, is what I'm saying. But we can move on to tip number 6.
So tip number 6, clear incremental goals. This kind of goes along with building a plan, right? Tip number 2, building a plan. When you build a plan, you are setting those goals as you go through it. What I think we as humans, kind of going back to just human psychology, talking about psych soc, we're not good with goal setting. Although we know that goal setting is great for people, we don't do it. How can students get better at this?
Yeah. So I'm going to start with a what not to do. It is not a goal to say, I'm going to get 5 points higher on the next practice test and say that that's your goal for the next practice test and be done there, right? Because that is an end point you want to achieve. That is not the actual things that will get you 5 points, right? That's saying like, I mean, I want a free car, but like me setting a goal of getting a free car does not bring me towards getting a free car. Though if anyone's watching and wants to give me, I digress. Really,
sounds like goal setting.
Oprah, where are you? Oprah.
Really, this ties in really deeply with the prior point of reviewing a test and noting trends, right? What you want to do in your next test is perhaps you would like to get more points in a certain section, but really what you want to do is you want to say, okay, I just reviewed and I noticed that in cars, I am missing the questions that ask about the author's opinion. My goal is by the next time I take a practice test, I want to be more comfortable and better at answering author opinion questions, right? I want to be more familiar with that. I want to do practice in between now and then to get me there. I want to review that practice and learn from that. I usually recommend setting, depends on how frequently you're testing, but let's say you tested and you reviewed and you're going to test again in 2 weeks with another practice test. I might set 2 or 3 small goals per section that are very oriented around a specific skill. It could be a learn a content piece, like maybe I just don't understand acid-base chemistry and I'm going to lean really hard into that. Could be critical thinking based. I want to change less answers from right to wrong. And so I'm going to do some practice where I focus on not doubling back and changing my answers. Anything like that, but really that is what I mean by what I would mean by setting clear incremental goals is setting goals that are very action oriented, that I can assess myself against repeatedly between now and my next exam, and that I can actually see success on in the next exam. Because one of the things that I know students get incredibly stressed out about, because it's stressful, is taking another test and not seeing your score go up. But you can have improved from a prior test to the next test on the things that were your goals and see that kind of score lack of change you hit plateaus for all kinds of reasons. But if you have clear incremental goals and you are measuring those from test to test, you can actually see that you're improving on the things you're focusing on and keep on moving on to new, most important things to focus on in your next test. Yeah.
Awesome. Joelle, Adam, any tips on setting goals?
Yeah, I'll add the classic adage, SMART goals. I think everyone may have heard about those. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, our favorite word here, realistic, and timely. And so making sure that whatever goal you're setting, it's a specific goal, meaning that it's something that you can actually write down and say, this is what I'm going to improve on, exactly what Liz is talking about. Measurable, so that the next time you take a test, you can actually look back and say, hey, either I went up or I went down. Whatever happened, you can see if you're actually improving. Attainable, making sure it's realistic and that you can actually attain that. And timely, that you have a timetable for when you want to achieve it, the 2 weeks, the 1 week, the 1 month, whatever your timetable is. And so I think when you're setting a clear goal, to know if it's clear, you use that SMART phrase, and that can help you really understand if you're getting there, to not just say, I'm going to do better the next time, but really set out what you need to do to get better the next time.
Yes, I can. Yeah. There was a question about when we plan to have this session end, and depending on your time zone, it's going to be a different exact time. But our plan is to be here for about another half hour. So just to set an expectation. However, the one thing I want to dig in on the incremental goals was one thing that Liz said about setting goals of comfort with a certain topic or a certain kind of question. And this is just one of my particular drums that I like to beat for just my classes and students and people to talk to about the MCAT is metacognition, thinking about thinking, realizing, being mindful of the logic that you're following when you take tests, what you are confident with, how quickly you're able to get to answers. And not only that, because it's also easy to get overconfident. You want to check to make sure these things are correlating with getting answers correctly. But that is how you identify leading indicators of score increases. You can't take a full-length exam every day. You probably don't want to take a full-length exam more than once a week, maybe twice a week, if really the endurance is the only thing you need to train. And so in those days in between, being able to test what you're actually scoring, your leading indicators are how many questions did I get right on individual passages if you're doing things realistically, but also how quickly was I able to get rid of obvious wrong answers in cars? How confidently was I able to read tough philosophy or social sciences passages? How quickly was I able to just grok the study design in a hard biochem passage that involved a lot of PCR or studies or big multi-genic cancer studies or something, because all of those are really challenging, and you are going to have to do a lot of steps of thinking that you can observe as well. And so have those be part of your incremental goals.
Goals. Well, that's 6 tips for all of you who are watching this, taking the MCAT, 60 days or less, or if you're a little bit more, that's okay. We'll let you stay. But those are great tips for everyone taking the MCAT to really help refine what you're doing day in and day out to maximize your preparation, your studying, your knowledge, everything, so that you can do well on your MCAT test day. And you only hopefully I pray you only need to take it once, because that is a beast of a test. So as we move on, let's talk about something that some students seem to be hinting at. Like, I would love if Blueprint and Sketchy did something together.
Yeah. So if you were hoping for this, good premonitions there. Drum roll. Thanks, Adam. we do hang out for fun. You know, they're secret. All the test prep companies have parties, but no, really, we're here for a reason. Blueprint and Sketchy, we're companies with very similar sort of values, thoughts about students, and we know that really an area where there is a lot of hunger out there for students is in the space of needing a little bit more, needing something to push your score a bit higher, needing to take that next step towards your goal. And that's why we've put together the Blueprint and Sketchy bundle, which we're so excited to talk about. So if you want to hop to our sort of description of what's in that sucker, yeah, we have on the Blueprint side, and I'm going to let Adam talk about the Sketchy side. What we bring to the table, and we're extra excited to bring to the table for y'all, are our exams and our study plan in this particular bundle. Yeah, we have all kinds of things that we do, but we know that for a lot of students, especially for those of you who are looking at 60 days or less, you don't have time for a comprehensive course at this time, right? And you're probably already well on your way to your goal, but you might be looking for ways to really raise that score up even further. And so what we've kind of put together on the Blueprint end is we've got our exams. We know they're representative. We build them to make sure that they are preparing you for everything you're going to see on the real test. We recommend students take these and take the AAMC exams because, of course, you know, you got to take the real test maker exams. But next to those, these are really going to be the most helpful thing you could do in terms of practice tests. And we also are we've built out a very special study planner for this bundle product. It does include those study plans and will also help you plan to use your Sketchy resources. And it's also got, of course, all of our free Mcat flashcards. We've got over 1,600 flashcards included in this plan with all of their features and analytics that are going to help you figure out where exactly you're struggling. And once you know where you're struggling on those practice tests, what can you do, Adam?
You can use Sketchy to fill in the gaps. That's what you can do.
Tell me more.
The Sketchy portion included in this bundle is Sketchy Mcat. It's the whole thing. So everything that we have created thus far and everything that we do create while you have the product. It's 175. It's 175 plus and counting. We have done an analysis of the test maker blueprint and what gets and what's on those exams that the test maker has released, and what is most challenging for students, and what is best suited to be learned through the Sketchy learning method. And we've been, working our way from the top, and we are continuing through. We have already released 9 different releases this year, and we're doing a lot more. But we already have a ton of high yield topics. We got biochemistry, really just chock full. We've got a lot of systems biology, but we also have some physics, some organic chemistry, a lot of psych-soc. Our psych-soc entire subject is all set in like animals as people land. So you've got the sleep lesson, which is about all of the sheep that are sleeping in like a dorm together, and you have the memory lessons, which are all about elephants, and you have it's a lot of fun. And we also have review cards. Really what we like to do with Sketchy is we really want to respect your study time. Sketchy is all about getting information to you in a way that you can memorize it more quickly, and you'll still want to come back and review it, but that review is also quick, and you need to review it fewer times and more sticks every time. So after you watch a lesson for the first time, you can review it with a review card, which is a more easy kind of click through of all of the same symbols that will quickly remind you of those things. And then we have quiz questions that allow you to test your knowledge, lock it in as soon as you see a lesson, and also come back to it later. And yeah, we have a lot of our own research we have done to make sure that Sketchy works for med students, and because we have had it work with med students for a long time, and we have also seen a lot of success with those who have already used it to take the Mcat earlier this year. And of course, it's the same kind of method that the old Greeks used to memorize those whole epic poems, the method of loci, remembering pieces of an image or a location with strange and memorable objects. And just really excited to pair up the Sketchy kind of content review, both content learning and content review, with these full-length exams and flashcards from Blueprint, which are really important to be part of a larger integrated prep program.
Yeah, I saw a few things come in about the analytics, and to kind of like paint a picture of honestly why we were so incredibly excited to work together. You can take a Blueprint full length, which is scheduled for you in your study plan on the day you said you wanted to take a full length, right? You take your test, and on that analytics page, not only are you going to see all of those trends I mentioned earlier, the things that were my spreadsheets back in the day have become the analytics that we serve up to students, so you don't have to make your own, like kind of strung together a spreadsheet. We do all of that for you. But you look at that page and you see, oh man, I am not doing well on carboxylic acids, right? And then you can go right to your sketch on that material, right? We've got a sketch. Well, Adam, you guys have got a sketch that's named just for that you can go straight to, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it, which is that you can see your results, and that's why we think full lengths and Sketchy are such a good pair. You can see exactly what sorts of topics you struggled on. It's in your analytics, and it can lead right into whatever you want within the Sketchy product, though we also use the study plan feature to order up and structure all the lessons in the first place. I'm not sure if we have, that might be a visual we have coming up, actually.
I think it's there, and like it's little, it's there and it's little. Yeah, if you're not really sure on what content you need to study, or if you're maybe earlier on in your journey and you feel like you really need to review everything, that's where we started from with this study plan. And so it does actually build out for you a plan to be able to get through everything in your bundle. You'll get through all of your sketches and you'll get through your exams. That said, if you're trying to do it in like under a month, for your own sanity, we won't put like 10 exams in your study plan. If you chose a 10 exam bundle and you've got a month, you can add them back in. It's really, really easy to add things or move them around in the study plan. If you're doing what we've said multiple times you should do and customizing your study plan to where you're at, you can move things around really easily to make sure you're addressing everything.
Yeah, also there are a couple other questions here. Is it important to take Biochem 2 before the MCAT? No. Whoever said not required, also correct. I'm not saying, getting a little more practice with biochem will hurt, but the MCAT is scoped so that it covers the first semester of what most schools consider biochemistry. Also, is this also good for those who are more than 60 days to their test? Absolutely, yes. The access itself is for 6 months, and the generation of the study plan will accommodate whatever your time period is. It'll separate those exams, like Liz said. If you got a shorter time period, we may not schedule them all back to back to back to back to back, but then Sketchy lessons are then distributed from whatever, not literally your first day, because literally your first day is your diagnostic exam, and then your second day is reviewing the diagnostic exam, but your third day is when the sketches start, and then those are distributed, at least by default, up until 2 weeks before your stated test date. But we do expect, you will drag and drop and move things around based on your strengths and weaknesses and preferences.
I also saw a few other questions in the chat that I want to make sure to address, in part because I want to brag about a team at Blueprint that I think are just not only some of my favorite people, but people that some of you who may have already interacted with them might be huge fans of. Our student success team is really the group that talks to any student who calls in with any question. I see several of you are asking about what to do if you already have access to either both of these things, our exam bundle and Sketchy, or one but not the other. And the answer to that is, definitely chat in and talk to our support teams who will be able to help you out with that. They are also just lovely humans. But this is something that we are officially launching starting tomorrow. So can't do that for you tonight, but starting tomorrow, you can ask them about that. And we're so incredibly excited to be able to put this out there for everybody. Really, really hyped. And for today, for attending today, we want to make sure that if anyone does want access to this, you are able to get it. And so we do have code BP10 SKCHY, which you can use to get 10% off of that bundle. Will work just until Friday of this week. So launches tomorrow and stops working end of day Friday. And I know that we mentioned earlier on that we would have a giveaway in today. Can you guess what we're giving away? Giving away a bundle. Of course we are. Very, very excited to do that. And we will email you that code as well. So if you missed it, don't worry. You're getting that emailed recording. You're getting that emailed code. But first, let us know in the chat, what is your goal MCAT score? If your username right now is sketchy, please make sure to include your name in that message, because otherwise we are not going to be able to help. So put your name and your goal score into the chat, and we actually have a team of elves here in the office who are going to be working very hard on trying to choose a winner once we've got all of those answers in.
They may or may not be the same elves from the reflection sketch earlier. Just gonna let you imagine who's working on this and helping pick the award.
That's awesome. The scores, the names and scores are coming in fast and furious, like it was at the beginning. So lots of people still here engaged, wanting to win this free bundle. Pre-med students are the best for wanting free stuff. So we are here for them. Wow.
Yeah.
Great session.
Yeah, and we've got a little bit of time after this. So once we've sort of chosen our winner, I think we're here to stick around until the end to answer any other questions that do come in. Make sure to put your name and your goal score in chat first. Don't miss out on the giveaway. But after you've done that, please do feel free to put questions into that chat. And for the person who asked, does this go to everyone or hosts and panelists? Goes to everyone if it says it goes to everyone. Goes to hosts and panelists if it says goes to hosts and panelists. And for this message, you would want to send it to everyone. So update your chat to go to everyone if you haven't done that already. Yeah, get it now. Took me a second. Sorry about that.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, like Liz said, we're here for about 15 more minutes. We'll answer some more questions if you have some. We'll keep looking for them.
Yeah, I don't know if we can.
Let's see.
Yeah, did that work?
Oh, it's down here.
There it is. There it is. Okay. That's what this computer's good for.
Some of the Q&A questions, this is a very popular question that students have with the MCAT is, do you recommend the diagnostic? With a free Blueprint account, you get the free half-length diagnostic as well as that first free full-length. Lots of students think the diagnostic is just a marketing scheme. It's scored poorly, so everyone gets scared and has to use a product. What are your thoughts on a diagnostic?
Yeah. So first, I'm just gonna say, putting your name in the chat more than once, not gonna
No.
change anything. So if you're just pasting over and over and over, you can probably calm down. We've got you.
The elves
You know who you are.
And in fact, we have a winner. It is Inara Jarawella, and I am so sorry if I mispronounced that. But a beautiful first name, actually. Inara Jarawella. Congratulations. We'll be reaching out to you with more information on that. So excited. And for the rest of you, of course, the 10% off is still out there. For the question on the diag, honestly, on the one hand, I guess you could say, like, I know students are sometimes concerned diagnostics are sort of scaled in a sus way. Honestly, we believe in our tests. Like, we believe in our tests and we believe that they're great. And we also believe that MCAT students are smart. Like, I'm pretty sure that if our diag was just meant to be brutal and meant to give everyone a low score, everyone would know because it would be pretty obvious. No, we work very hard to make sure our tests are scaled and scored appropriately. That does include the diag. Now, I'll say I think everyone should start with a diag, whether it's called a diagnostic and a half-length test or it's a full-length test. You need to diagnose yourself, right? Treat the MCAT like you're treating your weaknesses. So you need that early diagnostic experience. You need to take some practice very early in your prep. I would recommend then continuing to check up with more tests as time goes on, but you're going to need a diagnosis at some point of your weaknesses. And it's a good idea to take a diag early. And a diag is a nice test. It sort of eases you in that ours, at least, is about a half-length test. So if you're not quite ready for 7.5 hour long test life, it's a good way to get a feel for where you're at without necessarily committing that 8 hour full day. I'm not sure if anyone else has thoughts on the diag specifically.
Works for me.
Okay.
What your advice was. So we have some questions that came in through the Q&A function in Zoom that have been coming through actually kind of this whole session, but there are also some that are coming in the chat. I can get to a few in the chat. How do we time our breaks even though we're not allowed to have a watch? You will typically get up and out of the testing room during your break. And in fact, you're going to want to, because probably you're going to want to, if you should be, you got to stretch your legs, get a snack, head to the restroom. And there are clocks everywhere in the testing center. So,
and when you say break, I think that's the confusing is when you're done with a section, that is your break.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lunch in the middle.
Oh yeah, sorry. Well, but
lunch is like 30 minutes. It's just a longer break.
It's true. Lunch, snacks, etc. So yeah, just to get a couple ones that came in through Q&A. Someone had a question about their timeline, that they have a kind of course that they are finishing in January, and then they're taking their test a couple months after that. What do we think about that timeline? This was a 60 days or less until the Mcat session, so it's a little bit different than what this was originally pitched towards. But that's actually a really great. That is a perfectly good timeline, Kayla, who asked that question, which leaves you good time to have finished kind of the big chunk of initial learning and content review, and then if you've got 2 months until your test, that's 8 full lengths you can take, 1 a week, and just cycle that every time. So yeah, that's a good time frame.
Yeah, I'm trying to. No, I'm looking. Some questions about what you can do during the test taking period. What I would say is, because they do change these rules sometimes, right, and change them a little bit more regularly during the pandemic, it's worth checking the test center's rules. They do list those on the website. It's a downloadable from the AAMC. And what I'll note is when you see some rules where you're like, why on earth is there a rule about that? Because somebody tried to cheat that way. That's why there's a rule about that. So whenever you're frustrated about a rule about something in the testing room, like why can't you have certain things? Don't try to cheat on the Mcat. That's tip number 7. Don't try to cheat on it. It's not gonna work well for you.
No gum in the testing center because someone pretended that their balled up roll of cheat sheet paper was gum, and then so just nothing in the mouth.
Why can't I wear a hooded sweatshirt? Because somebody put some things on the inside and did this. Someone did it.
Yeah.
And someone asked about managing test anxiety on test day, which is a great question. I'll say one of the things that can be incredibly tempting because of how our brains work is after you finish a section to sit there and then think about all of the things that you wish you had done differently or had spent more time on, or that question that is going to be burrowed in your head forever because you didn't think you needed to learn about 18th century lampposts for the car section, but now you really regret that you didn't read up on those ahead of time because man, it would have helped. When you are in a break between sections, it is time to focus on the next section. And the same is true during the test. When you find yourself starting to freak out or stress out about something behind you in the exam, something you've already worked on, pause for a second, take a deep breath, and refocus yourself in the moment and on the next question to come. One of the things I've had students tell me in the past is that they'll move on from a question and then 4 passages later, they'll suddenly realize the answer. And that can be okay if it happens occasionally, but one thing to watch out for is if that's happening to you regularly, are you actually focusing on the 4 passages that happened in between the time you first saw that question and later on? So making sure to take those mini breaks. Anyone else have thoughts on the test anxiety question?
I posted a link to an episode I did with a psychiatrist who works with a lot of medical students with test anxiety. That's pre-mid years episode 337. So I posted that link in the comments.
I was just also going to add that I think what we talked about earlier with the practice does make a big difference as well. So making sure you're getting into that routine, realizing that once you do it over and over again, kind of getting it to feel second nature to yourself, whether that's doing power poses before you go into the testing exam center, whatever you can do. Yeah, exactly. Just like that. Doing something that like is your routine to get you go into test day, you have that comfort behind you. And of course getting a good night's sleep beforehand. I don't know how close people are, but that's the big thing. I think some people get super nervous beforehand, can't sleep, and I always like to say, like, go exercise the day before, wear yourself out so that when you sleep you get a good night's sleep so you can wake up refreshed and ready to go.
Same thing. I really second the point about sleep. Like, just one of the best ways you can spend your time the week before your MCAT is getting 8 hours of sleep at night instead of 6 hours of sleep a night. For instance, you should be, that is more valuable time asleep than it would be studying the last few days before the test, because so much of what feeds into test anxiety and all of those thoughts is just your baseline level of restedness. And so you can be more calm and think more clearly if you're more rested. The other thing about test anxiety is, I'll get back to my sort of mindfulness and like metacognition piece, which is you got to ask yourself, what will it take for me to be less anxious when I walk in? And you've really got to think about potential paths and actions you can take and things that you can do, ways that you can prepare that will put you more at peace, and focus on things you can do. You guarantee you can do. Focus on, your internal locus of control instead of your external locus of control, to name check a little psych soc content, I guess, of things you can do to prepare, as opposed to, well, I'll be a lot less anxious if I get a 520 on my last practice test. Well, you should try for that, but you can't guarantee that. Think about the actions you can take during your prep, the things you can prepare, especially in those last few days, in order to make peace with yourself, and then go in and not leave anything, not leave anything on the table.
All right, I'm going to be really selfish here. I haven't gotten to teach a class in a long time, and I have a story that I love telling that is really about a specific piece of anxiety. For a lot of people taking the MCAT, you are not the only person in your life invested in you doing well. Parents are often really, really focused on MCAT. Your parents have this dream for you, you have this dream for yourself, and there are a lot of people in your life who may be well-meaning and want to help you, but during your week before the test, and in particular the day before the test, you do not need to be talking to people who are going to be stressing you out about how you're going to do on the exam. And what I always did in my classes is a mini dramatic reenactment of a phone call with my mother the day before the exam, where she called me to inform me that she just talked to my Aunt Pam and had been reminded that my cousin Blake got a 36 on the MCAT, which back in the day was like a quite good score. And she was sure I would do great, but they'd still love me even if I didn't. But like, it would be good if I did better than Blake, because she doesn't like Pam very much. And whatever your version of that is, not all of you have an Aunt Pam and a cousin Blake. These are real people. This is a real thing. Not all of you have those things in your life, but you do have things you can choose to do, per Adam's point, per Joella's point, things you can choose to do in your week before the test that will raise or lower your stress. Someone way early on mentioned Reddit and SDN. Those are other good examples of things that might raise your stress level. Choose to interact with people and things that will build you up and make you feel confident in the week before the exam.
That is it.
Yeah.
Let's get one more question in here.
The last day, I hope.
A juicy one.
Hope never.
Yeah. The last day to get the Blueprint Sketchy Bundle will be far in the future. We have not planned that date. I will say the last date to get the extra discount code with the code that we just that we
Friday.
just shared is Friday, 2 days from now. So that is one that will expire. And also, to be clear, that is, so the bundle itself involves a discount. It doesn't just connect the two things. The bundle itself is the cost of Sketchy plus the cost of whatever exam bundle, and there's a discount basically, but this is an extra 10% off of that as well.
Yeah. Amazing. One more question?
There's a question of, can we extend the bundle after 6 months? Talk to us then is the answer there.
Yep. Talk to us if you need to extend it after 6 months. And we are always doing things to be able to support students, but at that point we'll be able to talk to you about those options a bit more. Right now, probably you don't have 6 months in it already because it's not launching till tomorrow.
Any other things anyone saw in the chat wanted to call out quick? I think we might be ready to go.
No.
Yeah. I'm seeing just a couple more. I would say for the what's a good starting point, where do you need practice? As we kind of said earlier, taking a diag, taking an exam early to figure out your weak areas, and then focusing on getting more practice where you need it, the kinds of things you're struggling with based on the exams you're taking. That may mean you need a Q bank for some people. If you're really struggling with everything, if you're really struggling with accountability and motivation and you need something more, that may actually mean that you do need a comprehensive course, right? There are different solutions that are really the right thing for different students. But what's important to do is kind of get yourself started, start diagnosing your weaknesses, and then pursue the resources that are going to get you from where you're at to where you need to go, and make a plan. Follow those tips we covered.
There were a couple more practical questions about just like the bundle itself. Where can you get it? What does it cost? If you are signed up for this webinar, you will be getting an email with all of those details. Like I said, it's launching tomorrow. You'll also, I believe, get a chance to meet those characters that you saw in this. Those are brand new original characters for this bundle. The pirate and the fellow in the chicken suit. Yes.
Yeah.
The point is, they're two new characters. They're a team, just like Blueprint and Sketchy is the idea. This has been a lot of fun. I hope that everyone here just absolutely, does a out of the park home run on your MCAT and in your prep. Don't leave anything on the table when you go in. Go get the score you deserve. Find ways to find community, to have fun along the way. Can't wait for all of you to be saving our lives when you're doctors, I guess.
Oh, awesome. Thank you all for coming and hanging out with us tonight. Joelle, Liz, Adam with the wrong last name. Thank you so much for having me hang out with you all tonight.
Ryan, thanks so much for being our MC as we kind of sat here in the Blueprint studio. Very exciting to have everyone here and very excited to have you kind of help guide us through our tips and through this really exciting webinar.
It was a
Thank
blast.
you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good night.